Hello, everyone. I'm Tanushree Ganguly, Director of the Air Quality Life Index Initiative, and it is my absolute privilege to welcome all our participants tuning in from different parts of the world. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. As many of you know, we released the latest update to the Air Quality Life Index report last week. And while the Canadian wildfires and decade high pollution levels in the United States took the media by storm, the reality is that every person on Earth, not every person, but almost every person on Earth is exposed to polluted air, which makes air pollution the greatest external threat to human life expectancy. And despite that, billions of people around the world do not have access to information to take protective measures or to hold their governments accountable. It is in this context that we shaped this year's report. You'll hear a lot more about the report as the webinar progresses. You'll also see a demonstration of our newly revamped website with a bunch of shiny new features. And for that website, I'd like to give a huge shout out to our communications team, Vicky and Molly, and our partners, VIT. It was their imagination and their creativity that made this excellent tool possible. But before we dive into all of that, I'd first like to invite Dr. Michael Greenstone, founding director of University of Chicago's Institute of Climate and Sustainable Growth, director of the Energy Policy Institute at the University of Chicago, and the creator of the Air Quality Life Index. It is because of Michael's vision that the Air Quality Life Index really exists. So handing it over to Michael to share with us what is it that guides us to do what we do at EPIC and at AQLI? Why has AQLI stood the test of time? And why does it continue to be more relevant than ever? Over to you, Michael, for your opening remarks. Michael, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. There, is that good? Okay, sorry. So I'm really excited to be here today and talk about the important work that we've been trying to do on the Air Quality Life Index. And I want to just start by providing some background or context. So at the University of Chicago, at the new Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth, and at the Energy Policy Institute, really what our focus is the world faces a challenge on how to balance between two really critical and urgent goals. The first is how to have environmental quality that makes people's lives fuller and allows them to lead longer and healthier lives. And second, how to ensure that we continue to have robust economic growth, which is so necessary, and of course, in many parts of the world, and of course, equally allows people to lead fuller and healthier lives. And so that's kind of the frame that we see everything through. And when we originally started the Air Quality Life Index, what the focus was that we didn't think people in governments had all the information necessary to make informed choices and find a proper balance between environmental quality and economic growth. And once we started digging into it, and Tanushree mentioned this, what was so surprising to us is that air pollution is the greatest external threat to human life on the planet. The average person on the planet is losing about 2 years of life expectancy due to air pollution concentrations that exceed WHO standards. Of course, that 2 years is an average, and so it varies. There's parts of across the world, and there's parts of the world where people are losing several years of life expectancy due to air pollution. Yet, and I should say that's more than people lose for child and maternal malnutrition or HIV or road accidents or wars or really anything, and as Tanushree said, any external factor. And so our starting point was, whoa, why is this not at the top of people's minds? And it seemed like a classic, in economics we would call it a market failure. What do I mean by that? It means that since people don't have this information readily available in many parts of the world, they are not able to take the right actions to protect themselves, be it spending less time outside, unpolluted days, wearing masks, or installing air filters or air purifiers in their house, or governments didn't have the information so that they could achieve the proper balance between these two big goals. So we set out to create the AQLI as a means to fix that problem. And I think we've been surprised with the uptake. There's certain parts of the world it goes, and I use this word hesitantly because I'll use it again in a minute, like it goes like wildfire. It gets all over the media attention, and we have seen the impact of the AQLI grow over time. Members of Parliament and other governing bodies around the world now cite it and trying to advance legislation. So our aim is to continue the Air Quality Life Index, and one part of that is annual release update, and then Tanushree will be talking about the terrific new website that we created that helps make this information hopefully more salient and more easily accessible. And so with that background, I'll just hit a couple of the key points from this year's release or this year's report. The first is, and I think we were all a little surprised by this, but in parts of the world where decades of regulation and policy had basically moved pollution levels down, had moved them down dramatically, where pollution was probably not, air pollution was not the first order problem. And it's like just when we thought we'd defeated pollution, it's back. And the reason it's back is due to the wildfires. And those wildfires are very aggressive in Canada, in the United States, and this year I think Europe is setting a record. And in some sense, this is just the ghost of fossil fuels past. We defeated air pollution, or largely defeated air pollution in the United States and Europe and Japan and other places. And by controlling the release of particulates from the use of fossil fuels. But what we weren't keeping our eye on the ball was that those fossil fuels were causing the planet to warm, and that was producing wildfires and more air pollution. And now that is coming to the fore. And so you now see that in this latest year, there's parts of the country that are now in the top 10, top 25 most polluted places in the United States that really had been absent from those lists for several decades. The second thing I want to highlight that comes out of a report is at the center of our motivation, as I mentioned, what we do is to provide people with information so that they can and governments, so they can make better choices. And one recognition that we've had over time is, although that we hold the Air Quality Life Index near and dear to our hearts, it only provides information once a year, or annual averages, is that people need more real-time information. And so under Krista's leadership, we started something called the EPIC Air Quality Fund, and that supports local governments and communities doing real-time monitoring with frontier monitors so that they can get access to information about what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And the early results from those efforts have been incredibly encouraging. We've seen governments respond to them, we've seen people respond to them, and it's kind of helped galvanize recognition of the problem. And then the last thing, which I will pass the torch here to Krista, is through this webinar, we want to introduce this new website that we've created that hopefully will allow people to gain access to the information in a more compelling way. So with that, I want to say thank you, and we appreciate your engagement on helping to raise awareness about air pollution, which is the world's greatest external threat to human health. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael. Really appreciate those remarks. And I think they're perfect framings for the rest of the presentation that we'll give today. And so Tanushree and I will tag team the rest of the presentation to tell you about this latest report, which, as Tanushree said, came out just a few days ago, our annual update for 2025. There should be a link that will be shared in your comments that you can access, but the tiny URL is here as well. And essentially, as both Tanushree and Michael have said, the Air Quality Life Index seeks to give information where it doesn't currently exist, especially to increase demand for clean air so that billions of people can ultimately live longer and healthier lives. And of course, we do that through quantifying the impact of particulate pollutions on particulate pollution on life expectancy. And so the framing for the rest of the presentation is I'll go through some of the results, unpack what you heard from Michael, and then Tanushree will go through and discuss the updates for the website and how they can be relevant for you in your community. And I'll highlight, so this annual update, it's packed full of information. So you're going to get a little snippet here. But if you go to this to the report itself, you'll see updates on every section, every region of the world. So there's going to be something relevant for you and in a lot more detail than what we can capture in this. So please do visit the website and read the update. And just a quick shout out to the entire team based in the US, India, Germany, who've been part of this process, and a huge thanks, and as well as to VIT, who Tanushree already gave a shout out to, as well as the University of Washington in St. Louis, where we get the satellite derived PM 2.5 data. So into it. So as Michael said, PM 2.5 pollution remains the largest external health threat to human life expectancy on the planet. It removes about 1.9 life years from our average life expectancy. And putting this in perspective, that's equivalent to the impact of childhood and maternal malnutrition, unsafe water and sanitation, HIV/AIDS, and all sexually transmitted infections combined. So it still has an outsized impact. And also, as was referenced, the surprising thing, though, this year was this where the highest increase in particulate pollution was from the previous year. And so it wasn't in the hotspots for air pollution across the world, though they still remain of high concern. But it was instead in the US and Canada. And I'm sure we all remember, many of us remember, if we rewind our minds back to 2023, those wildfires in Canada that made headlines across the world and happened to be the largest wildfires in Canada's history. And what this translated to was the worst PM 2.5 year air pollution year for Canada in our records that go back to 1998, and it was the worst year in the U.S. as well for more than a decade. Despite the fact that the wildfires weren't in the U.S., these Canadian ones, but they were so larger than England. In fact, they had a continent-sized impact on air quality. And when we looked at data from 2023, which this year's AQI examines, we see correlations between wildfires and increases in pollution in other areas. They're correlations. It's not quite as pinned down or as obvious as the Canadian wildfires that year. But what we do see across Latin America, for example, in Honduras and Belize, is we saw about 10 to 13 times the amount of area burned compared to the previous year, and pretty substantial, about 20% higher levels of PM 2.5 concentrations. So we're seeing a global picture and perhaps a harbinger of things to come. When we look at other research, we're finding that there's about double the frequency and intensity of extreme wildfires on the planet. Folks at NASA and others are finding that this is a result of fire weather becoming more common and human activities, specifically the burning of fossil fuels, as Michael referenced, this ghost of air pollution from our past is causing this issue. And as I sit here in Europe, we're ending our worst season for wildfires on record, especially fires that were going across Portugal and Spain that affected the entire continent and its air quality. And so regardless, though, of the cause of poor air quality, another correlation we're seeing, this trend we're seeing across the world, is that in the regions that are bearing the greatest health burden due to PM 2.5 pollution, they tend to have the least monitoring data. So if you look at this figure, this shows the number of monitors per million people and the recommended minimum monitoring requirement. So government monitors, there's about 3 monitors per million people is the recommendation. You can see that Europe, US and Canada, Oceania, they're meeting that minimum requirement. But then when you look at where the burden of PM 2.5 pollution is the worst, here in orange, you see this is exactly flip-flopped. So places like Central and West Africa, South Asia, where folks are still losing about 4 years of life expectancy on average due to PM 2.5 pollution, there's still a lack of monitoring relative to the size of the issue. And in fact, from OpenAQ, we're seeing that about 5.5 billion people around the world live in countries with less than adequate monitoring. Everything that is light blue or gray, where there's no data, is indicative of this issue. And you can see Africa is prominent in having a lack of access to air quality information. And this is really a symptom of, I think, a larger issue with funding in the air quality space. And so if you look at other issues like HIV, AIDS, or malaria, and you look at the amount of funding per life year lost, in a sense. So HIV/AIDS is $5.6 billion invested per life year lost. Malaria, $4.1 billion invested per life year lost. And then there's air pollution. So there's $21.6 million invested per life year lost. You see, we're really orders of magnitude off in comparison with these other issues and investing in air quality infrastructure to address the problem. And one of those outcomes is that we have these large data gaps. And so, another thing to point out here, by the way, is it's not just a life year lost, dollar per life year lost issue. As we mentioned, PM 2.5 pollution is actually larger than these other 2 important issues, HIV, AIDS, and malaria, in terms of its impact on life expectancy, or really in terms of those 2 issues combined. So really just underscores the issue of the underfunding of air pollution globally. And so this is what motivated us at the EPIC Clean Air Program to support local actors to make air pollution data available and accessible to 1 billion people around the world, and help drive national level outcomes by doing so. So not just generating data for data's sake, but how can governments and others in a community use this information to drive clean air policy where it makes sense. And so, as we talked about at the top, we've launched this EPIC Air Quality Fund last year. We're currently helping 31 groups in 19 countries, and you can see those 19 countries outlined in yellow on this figure, where there's a particularly high opportunity to drive national level policy impacts by generating PM 2.5 data. And we're in particular interested in places where there's a lack of current government air quality monitoring. And you can see those places on this map in red. And you'll see quite a bit of overlap with where the yellow outlines of where awardees are and the countries in red. And so if you're interested in hearing one of our early stories about how generating air quality data can drive national level impacts, join us this Friday, right before Clean Air Day. We're going to be talking to some folks in the Gambia, one of the EPIC AQ Fund awardees from Permian Health, as well as the executive director of the National Environment Agency in the Gambia, and how these 2 groups have been working together. This government entity and this nonprofit have been working to really rapidly progress the Gambian air quality data landscape, and how this has actually led to national policy impacts, including landmark legislation that's on the cusp of being passed in the Gambia. So if you're inspired or want to be inspired, please join. There's a link there on the slide, but it'll also be in your chat. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tanushree, who will walk us through our new revamped website.
Thank you so much, Krista. And as I share my screen, I will request my colleagues to confirm that they can actually see my screen. Can one of you please confirm that my screen's now visible?
I can see it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Krista. And thank you so much for, running all of us through the key highlights of this year's report. And once again, hello to our audience. And I'm super thrilled to bring to you a new website. Of course, our website has been live since, last week. But, I have the opportunity now to sort of run you through some of these shiny new features that we've introduced in the website. Now, before we go into those features, I just want to say, and perhaps I'm being a bit partial here, but I really feel that this website is a bit of a good news for the global air quality community. And why is that? That's because through the website, people out there, I mean, all of you, can actually generate a lot of those insights that you saw in Krista's presentation yourself. And my job today through this presentation is to guide you through how can you do all of that. Now, the important thing here is that we've tried to sort of package 9 use cases of the Air Quality Life Index website in this presentation. And there is a lot more that you can do with the website beyond those specific 9 use cases. But I still feel that those 9 use cases could be a lot for us to process and internalize. And that's why what we've done here is that we've bucketed each of those use cases under these 3 thematic areas, right? So what I mean is that the use cases which pertain to initiating conversation are particularly relevant for countries where air quality action is still at a nascent stage. What I mean by action being at a nascent stage is that this is relevant for countries where air quality has not received the kind of political attention it does. Or this is for countries which have not started investing in creating air quality data infrastructure. This is for countries that are yet to adopt a national standard or a national regulation for air quality improvement. So all use cases which speak to those have been clubbed under this bucket. Now, the second bucket is taking action. And this is for countries which have acknowledged air pollution as an issue, but are yet to start taking action. So perhaps there is limited evidence as to where action needs to be prioritized or what kind of targets need to be set for seeing maximum health and public benefits from air quality action. So there are certain use cases that we've packaged within this theme. And the third use case, as you can see, is about measuring progress. And this is relevant for countries which have already started taking action, but have not yet started evaluating how those actions translate into air quality changes over time and what those air quality changes mean for potential changes in life expectancy. So that's first order of business, a humble attempt at trying to organize the information that you will see in the subsequent slides. The second thing before we go into the specific use cases is to help you all understand how to navigate this new website. I know we are all used to seeing the Air Quality Life Index tool in a certain way, but suddenly we now have a host of new features. And I'm going to take a minute to guide you through what these new features are and where you can find them. So I'm going to take a second to move out of my presentation and move into the Air Quality Life Index website. Krista, can you please confirm if you can now see the website?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Krista. All right. So the moment you log into the Air Quality Life Index website, you'll now see that there are 3 tabs. And I have a really shabby attempt. I've made a really shabby attempt at annotating these tabs. But these 3 tabs are exploring the map, by country, and data insights page. So as the name suggests, exploring the map will take you to the map tool, which I will show you in a moment. By country will take you to country-specific pages. This is a new feature, and I will talk you through that in a second. And data insights is basically report and data features that we generate. So first, I'd like to show us the explore the map page. And this is the page that we've always seen when we've logged on to the Air Quality Life Index tool. What we can do via this page is zoom in to any part of the world and see how air pollution affects life expectancy in this part of the world. You can zoom down to the country level, you can zoom down to the provincial level, you can zoom all the way down to the district level to see how air pollution really affects life expectancy in your region. The other piece, which I know that people often miss, and I used to miss this earlier, but now I know, is that if you switch from potential gain in life expectancy to the air pollution tab here, you can also see the pollution levels in different parts of the world. So all you need to do is switch from potential gain in life expectancy to air pollution. And again, you can see air pollution levels down to the district level in different parts of the world. And not just for the most current year, but you can actually use the slider, the time slider at the very bottom of the map interface to go all the way back in time and see how pollution levels have changed over time. Now, this is a little bit about the map tool, but what's interesting now, and I would like to draw your attention to these new tabs, which you'll now see on the top of the screen. So we have now included a bunch of new data features along with just the AQLI map tool, which you can now use to acquaint yourself with all different kinds of data sets. So first, we have a Health Impacts Explorer. You can use this to see how air pollution compares as a risk factor to other external risk factor. We started this presentation by saying that air pollution is the greatest external health risk. Of course, that is visible very clearly when we look at the global map, but things change when we move to the country pages, and I will show you that momentarily. And you can scroll below to also see how unequally impacts of air pollution are distributed around the world. The bubbles that you see here are sized by population and are representative of different countries in the world. And you can see, how the potential gains in life expectancy from breathing cleaner air vary from, from India to Bangladesh to Nigeria to Mexico. So here we are showing how unequal the impacts of air pollution are. Here, sort of the data for you to just download and play with yourself. Again, you can sort of go back all the way back to 1998 and see how the data has changed over time, sort of making all of this data easily accessible for all of you. The next thing, which I believe is really cool, is sort of lending a little bit of a global context to how the impacts of air pollution are distributed. So you can actually select regions from this drop down. So you can select most populated regions. You can, of course, select AQLI regions that we have in the report. You can look at OECD versus non-OECD. You can also look at, how pollution impacts vary across different income groups. So it's pretty obvious that the lower middle income countries really are the ones that bear the brunt of air pollution among the different income classes. The next thing that we've included here is another interesting sort of take at how global pollution level has evolved over time. A bunch of really interesting stories that we can see. So it's very clear that, in the recent years, the global pollution levels have somewhat plateaued. Plateauing to a large extent can be attributed to the significant decline that we are seeing in levels of pollution in China. We've also included sort of regional pollution levels like non-OECD, OECD, as is the case in the table above. So this is sort of lending more context to how global pollution changes have evolved over time and how different pollution levels across regions translate into global changes in pollution levels. The next feature that we have here is a really cool feature, which is around national standards. And this, again, is honestly a labor of love for the team. So just compiling information of which countries have standards, which don't have standards, is a difficult task in itself because many of these documents are actually in countries' languages. So for us to sort of package this information and ensuring that all of you have access to updated information is a bit of a task, but we try to do our best. And we also sort of reach out to people and say that if you spot any errors on our side in compiling this information, please let us know. The next feature is a little bit of a surprise, and I have it as a specific use case. So I am going to spare the detail on that and come to it when I come to that feature. All right, so that's a little bit about Explore the Map page. I'm going to quickly switch to the by country pages. And this is really where the meat lies this time. This is now a queryable page. So all you have to do is type the name of the country you're interested in, and the website will take you to the country's page with all the information that you need to kickstart a program or work on air pollution. From where air pollution stands as an external health threat, to the most polluted regions in a country, to how pollution levels have changed over time, to where the impacts are really concentrated. These pages now have information for all the 250 countries that we have in Air Quality Life Index's database. And finally, coming to the Data Insights tab. Now, this, of course, hosts the annual update, which is our annual report. But beyond that, what we've also included is these really cool data stories that we've managed to build through the recent Air Quality Life Index data. This is our attempt to sort of, bring in a new perspective and new storytelling to the air quality space. This is very different from the kind of stories that we see on air pollution, but this is, our sort of attempt at connecting the dots between different things that are happening around the world. All right, that was a long monologue. I'm going to take a brief pause and sip my glass of water as I go back to now sharing the specific use cases that I was talking about earlier. All right, I'm going to bother either Krista or Rishikesh again to tell me if my slides are visible.
Yes, I can see your slides.
All
Yes,
right,
they're
cool.
visible.
All right, so we've now talked about the semantics of the website and all the new features that we have added to the website. I'm going to now run you through the specific things that you can do with the website. And as I said earlier, we've included only 9 use cases, and there is a lot more that you can do with the website. And this is only the first of the many webinars that we are going to do. And so we are already in conversation with some of you to do the subsequent webinars. So this is only 9 use cases and trying to package them under the 3 themes that I talked about earlier. So first, which is initiating conversation, right? So from the map tool, you can very easily see what is air pollution's impact on life expectancy in your country. So you can zoom into the provincial level, you can zoom into the district level, and you can see how many years of your life you could potentially gain if pollution levels in your country or in your region were permanently reduced to meet the WHO guideline of 5 microgram per meter cube. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to run you through the 4 use cases under this bucket and then go back to the website to show you how it's done. So that's use case number 1. What is air pollution's impact on life expectancy in my country, in my region? So down to the regional district, down to the metropolitan area level, right? The second use case is what is the status of regulation in my country? And you would remember this map from earlier. While I was showing you the Explore the Map page, you would have seen this map. And what this is basically telling you is that does your country have a standard? If it does have a standard, does it meet the standard? If it does not meet the standard, so the yellow color here says which are the countries which don't have a standard. The light blue says which are the countries which have a standard and they've met the standard. This is also an interactive page. So when I show it to you on the website, you'll see that we also have the specific standard listed there. The next use case is how does air pollution compare to other external health risks in a country? And this is particularly important when it comes to building a case for increasing public investments toward air pollution as a public health issue. So this snapshot is for India. And as you can see here, air pollution is a significantly greater risk compared to some of the other health risks like dietary risks and childhood and maternal malnutrition. So what this means is that the government should potentially prioritize public health investments in air pollution as well, because it is emerging as such a big health risk. And this information is available for all the countries in our database. And the final and fourth use case, which is how weighted are impacts of air pollution in my country? Of course, here's a map of Brazil, and you can eyeball the map of Brazil and see how the impacts are concentrated in certain parts of the country. But we've also included this really cool scatter plot, which lets you see, if there are certain regions, what is the population of those regions where the impacts are really concentrated, and so on. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here again for a minute, and I'm going to go back to the website to show you all how you can access all of this information. So you go to Explore the Map page. This is something that I'm sure all of you have already played around with, because this tool has been a part of the AQLI website for a while now. And sort of you can go all the way down to the district level, tap on a country, you can click on it for more details, and you can see, how many years of life people in your region are losing as a result of air pollution. Now, these potential gains in life expectancy are with respect to the WHO guideline. But let's say you want to see how many years of life could people in your country potentially gain if pollution levels were brought down to meet just the national standard. And in many parts of the world, the national standards are significantly higher than the WHO guideline. You could still see how that would add life expectancy to the residents living in your country. So that's feature number one, impact of air pollution on life expectancy in your country. The second use case that I was speaking about earlier, which is around regulations. So I'll quickly scroll down on the Explore the Map page to show you what this map does. So as you hover over the different countries, you can see whether on what the country standard is. So for instance, Canada's standard is 8.8 microgram per meter cube, one of the strictest in the world. And if or not Canada was able to meet it. So obviously, because of the high pollution levels that Canada witnessed in 2023, it was not able to meet its national standard. And that's why it appears in dark blue. Similarly, as you see, Brazil has a very strict standard of 10 microgram per meter cube. And given the pollution levels that it witnessed in 2023, it was not able to meet its standard. So this plot gets updated annually based on the most recent year for which we have pollution data. So you can go and sort of explore what the standards are for different countries around the world and whether or not the country was able to meet the standard. All right. The next feature that I talked about was to see how pollution levels vary in a country. And I've already sort of opened up the Thailand page. I use the by country feature to get to the Thailand country page. If you scroll all the way down after the trend series plot, you'll see this really cool bubble plot, which shows you how different provinces in the country of Thailand are impacted as a result of air pollution. And so, for instance, you'll see that Chiang Rai is the most affected. And here people are at the risk of losing 3.5 years of their life expectancy as a result of air pollution. Somewhere here, we also have Bangkok, where the impact of life expectancy is much smaller than the kind of impact that we see in Chiang Rai. And this is the kind of comparison that you can very easily draw through this tool. And the final and really important feature that we have on the country pages, again, like I said, this is particularly relevant for policymakers to prioritize where public health investments need to happen. And as we can see in the case of Thailand, PM 2.5 is the greatest external health threat. So its sort of threat surpasses risks like tobacco and dietary risks. All right. And this information, I'm going to repeat, is available for all the 250 countries in our database. So this information, you can just sort of go list the name of your country and you can go down to your country level and see all of this information. And, I've randomly selected examples to illustrate some of these features. It's not that I've picked on certain countries. This is just to demonstrate, what you can do with the website. So with that, I'm sort of wrapping up the use cases under bucket one, which is initiating conversation. Okay. And now moving on to the second bucket of features, which is around taking action. And taking action, again, sort of just to remind audiences, this is relevant for countries which have already acknowledged that they have a problem with air pollution and they need to start prioritizing action, right? So the first feature that we have, and this is something that you can find on the country pages, which is identifying the most polluted provinces in your country. So, when you start program on air pollution, of course, you can start a national level program like we have in the case of India, the National Cleaner Program, and we also now have in the case of our South Asian neighbors. But sometimes you need to prioritize specific regions where the pollution problem is a little more extreme than the other. So this particular feature helps you identify. So as you will see in case of India, of course, the northern Indian plains, the Indo-Gangetic plains as we call them, are the most polluted. And you'll see a number of states from the northern Indian plains feature in this list. Similarly, in the case of Thailand, you're seeing sort of provinces from the northern part of Thailand, which are particularly impacted by fires, appear on this list. So that is use case number one, undertaking action. So how do you identify most polluted provinces? I have a fun anecdote to sort of share here. We were presenting results of our report last year in Nepal, and we'd said that one of the most polluted regions in Nepal is actually the Madhesh province, contrary to the belief that Kathmandu is the most polluted province. So it's just sort of putting that information out there to acknowledge that what we know already about air pollution might not be the entire truth, and there are more data sets to explore to see where the pollution really lies. Use case one, on taking action, identifying pollution hotspots. Moving on to use case two, which is identifying regions within countries which have seen the maximum increase in the last year, in the last decade or so. Of course, here you're seeing increase with respect to 1998, but as I will show you momentarily, you can change the time duration for which you're seeing the increase. And this is important because it can help policymakers identify which regions are emerging as areas of concern. So the hotspot feature lets you identify regions which have already become regions of concern. But this feature can help policymakers understand which could potentially become regions of concern in the years to come. Feature number two is around this. The third use case that we have is around assessing national level impacts. Now, why is this relevant? This is basically to guide policymakers on what kind of targets should be set for reducing pollution levels if we want to see maximum health benefits. But these targets also have to be set in the context of the economic abilities and regulatory capacities of the country. So again, through the map interface, you can actually select what extent of percentage reduction you want in pollution levels and what that would mean for improvement in life expectancy in your country. And the final and fourth use case. This one's very difficult to articulate, so I will actually show it to you rather than talk you through it. Anyway, so just to kind of summarize, there are 4 use cases within the taking action bucket, which is identifying pollution hotspots. The second use case is identifying regions which have seen the highest increase over time. The third use case is setting and implementing clean air standards. I will swing out again and then sort of quickly run you through what I meant by these features and how you can access them. So let's say we are in Afghanistan, for an instance. This is the country that I have now selected on my country page. So if you scroll all the way down to the plot below the unequal impacts plot, you can see the top 10 most polluted provinces listed here. You can also see the top 10 most populated provinces listed here and what is sort of the subsequent impact on life expectancy in these provinces. And right below this plot is where you can see, which are the top provinces where pollution has increased the most over time. Here, of course, the timer is set at 1998. But maybe in the recent years, new provinces have emerged where we are seeing the maximum increase in pollution levels. Let's try this out for another country. Let's try this out for Bangladesh, for instance, just to see how this information changes over time. Let's give a minute to the website to sort of download all the data. So there we go. Right, so if you look at from 1998 to 2023, Dhaka is the country where pollution levels have increased. Dhaka is the place where pollution levels have increased the most. Now let's sort of change this a little bit. So interesting. So over the last decade, it's actually Borishal where PM 2.5 levels have increased the most. So it is these insights that we can very easily extract through the website now using these features. And then the other feature that I was talking about, which was around setting and implementing stricter targets. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So when I initially presented the map interface, I showed you how you could calculate potential gains in life expectancy with respect to the WHO guideline. I also showed you how you could calculate potential gains in life expectancy with respect to the national standard. And finally, you could also see the kind of gains in life expectancy that you can get if you were to gradually reduce pollution levels in your country. So if you see, if Bangladesh were to reduce pollution levels by 20%, an average individual could potentially gain 1.2 years of their life expectancy. Now, if I change this to, let's say, 50%, you'll see that individuals could gain 3 years of their life expectancy. What essentially we are trying to share through this information is that the more you are able to reduce pollution levels in your country, the more significant health benefits you are likely to get out of it. And now, the final feature that we have under taking action, which is probably the coolest feature which we have now built into the website, is around standards. Now, this particular visualization that you see on my screen essentially divides up countries on the basis of what their standards are. So the bubbles that you see on the top of that line at the center show countries which have relaxed standards. And by relaxed, we say standards which are more relaxed than 30 microgram per meter cube. So let's say if you have a standard of 40 microgram per meter cube or a standard of 35 microgram per meter cube, that is significantly more relaxed than what WHO deems as permissible limit for clean air. And countries to the bottom of the screen are the ones which have relatively stricter standards. Now, what you can do is you can actually select a standard from this drop-down list, and you can see the life years that across the world we could gain if pollution levels were brought down to meet a stricter standard. And you can sort of play with this, you can sort of select a stricter standard, you can select a more relaxed standard, and you can see what this means for changes in life expectancy globally. So that's use case number 4 on taking action. I know this has gone on for a while, and I promised you all that this is going to be my final slide, and also probably the most important slide, because every time we release the report, this is the question that gets asked the most from journalists and from colleagues in different parts of the world, which is how do we measure the impact of changes in pollution level over time? Or how do we just see how pollution levels have changed over time? And this information is something that now you can very easily download from the website. You don't have to reach out to us. All you have to do is go to your country's page and download it from there. And I'm going to take another quick second to demonstrate how this is done. So for instance, we want to see how sort of pollution levels have changed in Nigeria over time. So using the by country tab, we go to the country page and we download, and we sort of, and we go all the way down to this table here. Now this table here, again, I'm going to annotate for a second. You can actually get information on potential gain in life expectancy. What you can also get is information on air pollution. And the only thing that you now need to do is hit the download button right here, and you will get province level information from 1998. And you can see how pollution levels have changed in your country. And this is honestly treasure trove of information for all kinds of storytelling that you want to do around air pollution in your country or in your region. So with that, I am going to hit pause on my presentation. But before I go, I just want to take another 10 seconds to drill down these 3 themes into our audience's minds. I know that we've gone through 9 use cases, but as long as you remember this, that using the AQLI data, you can initiate conversation, you can take action, and you can measure progress, you will know that for any of these things, all you need to do is go to the AQLI website and you will have what you need. So that's a wrap from my side. Thank you so much for listening to us. And I know that we have a ton of questions in the Q&A box. So I'm going to hand it over to Krista to help us navigate those a little bit as best as we can.
Thanks so much, Tanushree. That was very insightful and useful. And so we've gotten a few buckets of questions. I'm going to try to group these for us. So Tanushree, one of the sort of repeating questions we've gotten is really around what's the sources of this information. And what I mean by that is folks have asked why PM 2.5 and not other gaseous pollutants? Do we have interest in those other pollutants? Can we do this for other pollutants? Similarly, there's been a question around how can you calculate the AQI for Bolivia if there's no measurements on the ground? And so I think giving a little bit of background about the data sources for this tool might help with both those questions.
Awesome. Yes, I think this is another question that we get asked a lot. And we acknowledge the fact that the data and most countries around the world don't have, real-time air quality monitoring data. And that is why we rely on satellite-derived particulate estimates of PM 2.5. The other reason why we do this is because this is the only data set which is consistently available since 1998. We also want to use data sets which are comparable across regions. And that is why by default, we resort to using satellite-derived pollution estimates for calculating these numbers. And as you would remember in Krista's presentation, we did give a shout out to the atmospheric composition analysis group at Washington University in St. Louis. They are the ones who actually make this data available to us, and many other groups which are doing a global compilation of air pollution and its impacts on life expectancy. Having said that, the other important thing for all of us to note here is that the AQLI is essentially a causal relationship between long-term exposure to air pollution and impacts on life expectancy. Now, that causal relationship can be applied to pollution levels based on any kinds of data set. So let's say, your country now has a very well updated air quality monitoring infrastructure, and you want to see what that means for life expectancy in your country. We could very well help you to apply the AQLI causal relationship to that data set and see what new numbers that gives us. So that's a little bit about the data set. Does that answer the question that was there, Krista?
I think so. And then the only other thing I'd add is in terms of why we're not going to other gaseous pollutants is we're limited by what's available in the research record and what we have expertise within EPIC to focus on, and that has to do with a specific study, specific pair of studies that looked at PM 2.5's impact on pollution, and those are shareable from our website. If we can track them down in the next few minutes, maybe we can share them as well. And then one other question we've gotten was repeatedly was if folks want to download the raw data somewhere and make their own visualization, say they're a journalist or a researcher, where could they access the raw data? And I'll share that I did share a link in the comments if that makes your life easier, Tanushree. But if you wanted to talk out a little bit how folks might want to access the finer levels if they want, especially we had a request for district or county or department level data, not just the state or national.
Yes, of course. Again, so one thing that we sort of philosophically, ideologically believe in is open data and replicability. And that's why, all of this effort to actually open up data. I'm going to share my screen again so that this is very clear for everyone who's tuned in. So here we go. So the moment you go to explore the map and you see this is the map interface, right below the map interface, there is a small sort of box here which says explore the data. Now, if you click on explore the data, you will get directed to our GitHub repository. And the GitHub repository has all the data that you need. So if you want information at the district level, then you access the GADM2 file. If you want information at the province level, then you access the GADM1 file. And if you just want to do global comparisons, which is country to country comparisons, then you sort of access the GADM0 level file. I hope this answers the questions around how do we get the raw data for doing our own visualizations.
I think so. And then I think we've got one final question we can probably tackle. I'll state it and then give a response. And Tanushree, please add anything that you think I might be missing here. So one question we got, this was from Collins, and he asked, how, and we got a similar question from someone else, but how can you measure what is it? How long should you expect it to take to see progress on air pollution in a given place at the national level? And is it, as someone else had wondered, is it impossible to actually see that and know that the policy interventions resulted or caused that change in air pollution? I would say it's a tricky question. And I'd say two things. One, I look at other examples of places where we've seen this success. So China, probably most notably in the last decade, where PM 2.5 pollution's gone down by upwards of 40%. Prior to a decade before that, and you can see this decline, and you can also see the massive hundreds of billions of dollar investment that led to that. Similarly, in the U.S. and the EU, you can see similar trend lines. And then in a more less hand waving way, there's been a study done by a economist based in Australia and another one in the US who worked together to look at the impact of a single air quality, real-time air quality monitor's impact at the city level in terms of air pollution on a multi-year basis. And they started seeing progress that they could not just correlate to the existence of the data, but they could show a causal relationship. And this was on a 4, 5, 6 year time scale. It's tricky. I'm sure at the end of the day to be sure, but I think at the end of the day, if you're seeing over multiple years a downward curve to the data, then you know you're on the right path. And so I would say it's depends on the place, depends on the monitoring situation you set up, depends on the policies. But I think we all know what going in the right direction looks like, which is downward for air pollution. I don't know if you have thoughts, Tanushree.
No, all I can say is that we've included some really cool case studies in our report this year. So we have of course we've talked about China, which we do at length. We've also talked about Poland this year in our report because there we are seeing a decline over time. So like I sort of echo what Krista said. It varies from country to country, but what's important is the first step. Right. And that's what we are trying to push sort of people towards that. What is that first step that you need to take that drives people towards national level impact, whether it's setting up of a monitoring infrastructure, whether it's setting up of a standard, whether it's setting up of a clean air regulation. So what is that first step that you need to take? And then sort of, things start snowballing right after. So yes, echo Krista's statement and that's what we have on how action really happens.
Well, thanks, Tanushree, and thanks everyone for tuning in. I really appreciated the very active Q&A area. If we did not get to your question, we would love to. Please email us. You should have our contact information. If someone could please put our contact in the chat, we'll leave it up there a second before we sign off. But please do reach out. We'd love to continue the conversation. And thank you for attending this year's annual update. And we hope you find the information useful and hope that your work to push for cleaner air in your community benefits from it. And with that, goodbye, everyone, and thanks again.